Imposter syndrome says we're not authors.
But here's our books.
And here's our podcast. We are two book nerds talking about our indie author experiences
to spread the love of indie publishing and help other indies not feel alone.
Thanks for joining us, and now on to the show. Welcome back to another episode of Indie Book Nerds Podcast. We're your hosts, Jade Neoma
and Morgan Christensen. And today we're excited to have our guest, Andrew Valenza.
Hello.
Andrew is an Army veteran, having served as a photojournalist and public affairs specialist. He published his first novel, Empire of the Void, in June 2023 as a thank you to his dad and uncles for raising him on their favorite films. With the experience he gained from self-publishing, Andrew created his own publishing house to assist others on their creative writing journeys.
Amazing. A little bit about his book, Empire of the Void. Dex and Lacy Prullen are explorers from an alternate 1950s Earth sent out into the unknown universe to discover what waits beyond the stars for humanity. What they find will send them on an adventure facing off against an empire led by a godlike being and a galaxy of devout followers at every turn with no allies for light years. Content warnings include science fiction violence, the best violence. Well, there's no good violence.
Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, Andrew. We're really excited to have you. So tell us in your own words, what is your novel about?
It started out just as one of those things. It's sci-fi fun for the sake of sci-fi fun. It's a married couple lost in space, fighting their way back to each other. The first book is that. Really, it's just in one way, it's an homage to classic sci-fi film history. Really, it's a journey through sci-fi film history, where each book in the series covers a different era. So Empire is the classic space opera, Forbidden Planet, Star Wars, Flash Gordon style, while the sequel takes us into the 20s, 30s, the creature feature, like King Kong in space. And every book is going to genre hop like that. So really, it's an excuse to give a history lesson.
That's really interesting. I've read both books so far, and I actually didn't know that you were intending to genre hop like that throughout each book. So that's really interesting for me, just as like a fan of your work, to hear about that.
Well, I hope that means it was a smooth transition.
Oh yeah, it absolutely was.
And
And it's funny because I have a difficult time deciding which of the two books is my favorite, but sometimes I feel like I lean towards the second one because I think as much as it was a smooth transition, it was also just really refreshing. It felt like such a new experience for them. It didn't feel like they were just doing the same thing, in a new way. It felt like just a totally different experience, and like your characters were growing so much. Well, tell us about you and your writing journey. What brought you to the writer that you are today?
Great question. So my writing journey actually started a long time ago, thanks to my grandma. In short, we spent a weekend up at the grandparents' place. I couldn't sleep, and my grandma was a phenomenal artist. We actually just found this article written about her. She passed away like 2 years ago or a year ago, and somebody just out of nowhere did an article on all her artwork. She was a sculptor and a painter and everything, and phenomenal. Huge inspiration to me. And she sat me down one night when I couldn't sleep and gave me like an essay booklet. And was like, just write something, just be creative, um, tire your brain out. So I wrote this like 5-page fantasy story because I was a big fan of Lord of the Rings as a kid, and I had a lot of fun with it. I was like, oh, I could do this more. So for like the next 15 years, I was trying to turn that into a book, and it never worked in any way. Um, because there was nothing really behind it other than like I wanted to do a fantasy story. Um, I just had no idea what I was trying to say with it. And then just out of nowhere, uh, back in 2022, I was sitting in a hotel room and it finally clicked. There was a story I wanted to tell, like a Flash Gordon and Ellen Ripley as a married couple kind of thing. Um, and it clicked that I knew what it would be about because, as you said before in the introduction, my dad and his brothers raised me on film. My dad on the popular films, like sitting me down all the time to watch Back to the Future and Indiana Jones and Star Wars. Middle brother was all the weird cult stuff that he enjoyed that most people haven't heard of. And the oldest brother was like, all you need is Clint Eastwood and Martin Scorsese, and that's it. Um, so a lot of my memories with my dad and his brothers growing up was sitting down to enjoy these movies. I was like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to communicate. Um, so trying to find the right story to not be an homage, but a thank you, as you said before, was what made it all really click. Like, I finally have a story to tell.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. So I was raised on like Disney movies and animated films specifically. Like even Disney Channel felt like it was for big kids, even when I was a big kid. So yes, movies and film have a way of influencing all of our stories and our lives. And I could gush about animation forever. Um,
Well, I
well,
always wanted to be a director growing up. That was the thing. Like, even when I had started writing as a kid, I was like, this is just so I can have something to film one day. I mean, I'm standing in front of my movie collection.
Hmm.
It's much bigger than my bookshelf. But I started finding like I'm writing all these scripts already, and I'm enjoying the heck out of it. I don't know if I can swear, so
You
I will
can
try
swear.
you
You
not
can
to.
swear.
can.
Um, so it started like I was writing script after script after script, um, and that kind of helped me be like, I like the writing a lot more than when I actually got behind a camera.
I could see that. Yeah. I feel that I wanted to be an animator at Disney and well, I guess literally anywhere, but I did like the storytelling. I mean, I love to draw and stuff, but like the art industry and the animation industry is like way more competitive, whereas the book industry, like each of us authors are a little more like uh we support each other. Um, yeah, I fell more in love with writing stories than drawing them out and doing all the technical stuff and learning a 3D animation or modeling software. So I can relate a lot, and I do love your movies, your movie collection. It's really cool to see you on TikTok with all that stuff.
Thanks.
Pretty.
Well, Andrew, what do you what's your favorite aspects of science fiction? Like what makes you love science fiction so much?
I think that answer is twofold. One is just the possibilities. Um, like most of my favorite movies are science fiction, like Treasure Planet, Star Wars, stuff like that. Um, it's because there are no limits except for, the rules the writer creates. Um, and it's just so much fun. It's just wild and crazy, and it can go anywhere, and I love it. Um, but on the flip side of that, I think there's so much potential um, in sci-fi. My philosophy is the further you go from reality, the greater potential greatness it holds. Um, so, for example, Hacksaw Ridge, absolutely incredible movie. I watched it, bawl my eyes out every single time. It's absolutely beautiful. But that is a very, that was a real event that really happened. It's very easy to connect with, in that sense, where it's like that could have been somebody's grandpa, could have been, or even in modern day, like people go to war and people experience that kind of stuff. Um, so it's like, why is it that a movie like Treasure Planet, that one is animated, there's only a single human character, doesn't take place anywhere near our reality, can capture somebody emotionally just as much as that? Um, so I love that aspect of it. It's like, how far can I take this away from reality while still making it emotionally resonant with people? I think that's an incredibly beautiful thing. The reason why books like Lord of the Rings and the Narnia series have the impact they do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like that way with even my fantasy, and I feel maybe Jade feels the same way about hers. It's like we can take things, and emotions and experiences and still like make it fantastical and fun, but also feel the characters and learn something new about just about anybody, even though these aren't real people. So I totally agree with that. What inspired your series and your characters? I mean, we kind of already went over the all the films that you watched with your dad and your uncles, but maybe you can elaborate on maybe or where there's was there anything else that went into your book?
Yeah, so Like I said, each book genre hops, so it's like there's the inspiration for the first book is totally separate from the inspiration for the second one. And the second one was kind of cheating. I'll be the first to admit. Um, the first one was kind of uh, a whole, what's the word, conglomeration of Star Wars. Forbidden Planet was a big one. Forbidden Planet and Flash Gordon, um, and Planet of the Apes. For example, the prologue to Empire is kind of just a rehash of the opening of Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston's character, speaking into the recorder like, "Hey, I'm glad I got out when I did." Um, and then plot-wise, only when I finished it, right before it printed, I was like, "Wait a second, there are a lot of plot similarities to Flash Gordon." The two people from Earth, the love interest from Earth, flying out a little too far, landing on the planet, getting separated by the evil empire, and then him literally crashing in last minute before the Emperor takes her. It's like, I probably could have strayed a little bit further, um, but so it was all the space opera, and like I said, with the genre hopping, the second book is definitely a far cry from that, where I had to look at not so much the movies that were a staple in history as much, but the movies of that area that I connected with the most, which was King Kong. Um, and so I think that's the perfect creature feature, and I loved it as a kid. I still love it. It still blows my mind, the original 30s version. Um, so that was kind of like the foundation. But what I realized for Empire of the Void was it's a super fun book. I love it. It was everything I ever wanted it to be, but it's not the deepest thing in the world. It is through and through a fun adventure story. Um, and I was looking at that and looking at where it needed to go. And it made me think of Indiana Jones, which I know is not science fiction, but Indiana Jones is kind of the same thing. Raiders is a near perfect movie, not that deep. He doesn't really go through any arc. He's just a hero. He's just the hero. While Temple of Doom was like, hey, we should probably give this guy an arc of some kind. And that's where he becomes a hero. So I was looking at Empire, I was like, well, he's doing this not because he's a hero, it's because he loves her. Second book, if I wanted to make him an interesting character, he needs to become a hero. Um, the second one, the inspiration was King Kong meets Temple of Doom in space. Um, but at the very center of all is Dex and Lacy, this married couple. Um, they're like the epitome of a perfect couple. Um, my sister at one point was like, "You should put some like tension in there with like this other guy, like the bad guy from the first book." She's like, "I think they had something going." I was like, "No, they didn't. They are the perfect couple. Nothing will ever get in their way. The arguments over that they will have will never be like we're breaking up arguments. They will be how can we stay alive together arguments." And for that, the characters are not myself and my wife, but the heart of it is for her. It's Dex is the lengths I would go to.
Yeah, I absolutely see that. I think that that was to me like being your friend and knowing you and also reading your books and being fans of them. I can definitely see how your love for your wife has permeated into your book, and I can see that represented through Dex and Lacy. And please don't ever make them break up because it will hurt my heart too
No.
bad. They are the perfect couple. She never had anything with anybody else. Tell your sister that she's very wrong, that I do not agree with her. Well, the Emperor is this really, really interesting character that you have. He is just so much bigger on so many aspects than Dex and Lacy. They feel so small in comparison to him. And so I just wanted to pick your brain a little bit about how you chose to have him have such like a large claim on the galaxy already by time Dex and Lacy figure out who he is, because they're not even aware of him at first. They're just living their lives, and they all of a sudden they're in space, and then they come across this guy who's like, oh yeah, not only do I have this planet, I have many, many planets. I have a very, very far reach. And as far as him, how did you imagine his followers would be, such as like scared, adoring, loyal, etc.?
Um, So for the first part of that question is like this is, um, part of this comes into how I like to write fantasy and sci-fi. Um, Page taken from Tolkien is, and this is just because I think it's easier, is, the stepping into the larger world or a new world entirely. Um, so it's a different type of 50s. It's like the atomic age version of the future 50s, right? Um, there's enough there that people could just like step into, get it uh, without being overwhelmed too soon because I don't have confidence in myself to to do that. Not yet. I am a new author. I'm taking baby steps with my work. Um, so there was that aspect of like the literal why did I write it like that? But then story wise, this isn't really the start of the story. Um, and the Emperor is just a being existing within this universe. He's on his journey too. He's expanding. Um, we don't on Earth they don't know about him yet because he just hasn't gotten there yet. But oh boy, just you wait. Um, but to a big inspiration for the character himself, um, was two polar opposite inspirations. Narnia and Lovecraft. I got into Lovecraft a few years ago, the cosmic horror kind of stuff. I absolutely loved it. I wanted to find a way to incorporate that. But as far as a godlike character, as an emperor, um, one of the biggest inspirations for the series as a whole is Narnia, specifically the last battle, the final book in the series, and this idea that evil can take the form of benevolence, and just because people fall for it doesn't mean they are bad too. Um, so my dad was reading the book, and his feedback was like, "Yeah, you call it an evil empire, but it doesn't really seem that bad." And I was like, "Well, Dad, he does, kidnap and sacrifice a ton of people to eat them, but other than that, sure, why not?" But like the day-to-day life is just these people, they don't live in fear of the emperor. It's genuine praise. It's adornment, um, because that's what they know. That's what they've been brought into. And they've been given no reason yet why to not believe in it. Um, and I think that's an interesting idea because like I love the Emperor in Star Wars. Palpatine's great. He's terrifying. He's a gross old man. And he's purely evil outright to people. And I think that's great. I love it. Emperor Ming as well. Easy, but just a bad guy. And he shows face to everybody about that. So I wanted a villain that is evil and is terrifying, but I didn't want it. I felt like it might be cliche just to be like, oh, the people are oppressed, they're living in bondage, and they're just looking for a hero. They're not. They're just getting by because he's an effective emperor. Not great. That's not a good thing, but that's what he is. And there is terror in that too.
Yeah, absolutely. He is such a multifaceted character. I think in some ways it kind of reminds me of like prolific serial killers, how they were known to be very charming at times. And some of
Yep.
those guys, they totally fool people into believing they're these great people. And just because that's the same guy who will help you carry in your furniture and, says
Yep.
hello to your wife and asks how your kids are doing doesn't mean he's a great guy. So I think the Emperor is kind of like, the epitome of that kind of relationship with others.
Yeah.
So tell us, Dex and Lacey are both incredibly lovable characters, but in different and compelling ways. How do you navigate telling their love story across space and the looming empire at their backs?
So they are very different people. Dex is more, restrained, analytic kind of guy. Lacey is excited at every turn. She's happy to be wherever she is. She finds the greatness in everything. She finds the good in every person. Dex is very much like, I don't trust you and you. And it's not to be that cliche. There's plenty of reasons for it. We're doing it one book at a time. Um, but people rely on their partner's strengths that are not their own. Um, you know, locking them together, keeping them together. Um, and having the Empire at their back at all times only enforces their need for each other. The big thing in the start of the book is they're on point with each other. Like the ship's crashing, but they've got each other back. So they're a team. The whole point of them being on the ship together is that they were there was this psych eval, there were these tests for this mission, and it's like these two match up well, and they did because they do. So it works, and it works because there's that need. They have the abilities, they have the skill sets, they have the emotional capacities that the other person doesn't lack but needs to make up for. Dex especially needs Lacey. Um, and one of the challenging scenes for me to really show this relationship was when he's sitting alone on the ship after they've been separated, and this guy who's built up to be like he can't act first, he can make these decisions. He's the captain of the ship, is now at a total loss. Um, like he's missing this entire half of himself. Um, and all of that bravado, all of that strength, all that steadfastness is totally gone because even though he has been that person, she's not there just to be there with him, and he's broken at that point. So that was a tough scene for me to convey that because on the flip side, Lacey, who was you know the second man, wasn't the decision maker part of the team, is now surrounded by the actual enemy. Dex at least has it easy having kind of an ally. Um, and Lacey has to make up. She's like, okay, this was Dex's role on the ship. Now I have to be that to get out of this. I know he's coming for me, but I still am gonna, pull my weight, um, and be these things that he was before. Um, so they're like learning each other's roles, but even that doesn't work because she has things about her that Dex will never have, and is the reason why he needs her back.
I see that in their relationship a lot, how they rely on one another. And I also think that in book two, you did a really good job at showing how a couple can butt heads and it not affect their love and feelings for each other, and to agree on two totally different things. Like you said, Dex is like, hey, we need to worry about us. And she's like, I'm not leaving here and leaving all these people to die or to like be subjected to the emperor and like to and they're being like attacked by creatures and then they live like I fell in love with all of the characters in book two. Sorry, I'm gonna start like just going on and
Uh,
talking about it forever, but I definitely see how that was
Dude, I
reflected
prefer
in the
that
two of
one.
them.
Well,
um
for book two especially, I mean, that was the character book. And that was what I think shows the relationship best because it's Lacey being like, "Hey, we could die here, but come on, it could be fun." And Dex is like, "That's the dumbest answer ever." But I love where your head's at because it's her heart that's driving her. It's her care for these people that's driving her. And though he disagrees with it in the moment, he's like, "That is the most admirable thing. That's why I love you because you care so much about these people, just because they're alive."
yeah, I see that too. I definitely I just love their love story. They're just a very cute couple. Tell us what your favorite scene or dialogue was to write in either book.
My favorite scenes in both books were their um, I call them the chocolate cake scenes. Um, because of Spider-Man 2. There's a scene in Spider-Man 2 where like right at the end of the montage where like everything is going as wrong as possible. He saved the kid from the fire and everything, and he's like, "There's no escaping Spider-Man. My life is gonna be hell forever." And his neighbor comes in with a chocolate cake, and there's nothing behind the scenes. She's not trying to get anything out of him. It's just like a moment of breathing, like here's something nice for the character and for the audience. Just enjoy this nice little moment. Um, and it gets everybody, the reader, the audience, the characters back on their feet. It gives them the spirit they need again, the chocolate cake scene. So in the first book, a lot of that was the flashback to their first date. Um, it's just a really sweet moment um, of like we know where the story's been so far, and we know it's probably only going to get worse. But here's a moment to show, to remind us, like it's so worth it. We have this beautiful scene, like this, this verbal teasing, sparring, or whatever, um, and it's just so cute. It's so fun. They're about to leave everything behind, and they're so ready for it because they got each other. So knowing what's coming and knowing what's been is so worth it at that point. Um, like that's the moment. Read the book. If you go back to that scene again, it's like, yeah, yeah, Dex would do all that over again for her because of what we see in that scene. And then the second one, it's the pool scene. Like they find a cave and like starlight rain has found its way in and it's like illuminating this pool. It's just the two of them, and she sees into his mind, like everything that he did up until that point when they were away from each other. And it's this moment of just like, holy shit, the lengths he went to for me, and him just being like, yeah, don't regret any of it. It's those moments of levity and just the two of them alone, I love. Um, that just every story needs.
Oh, for
It's
sure.
these are action books, but I love the romantic bits.
Yes. Well, I can agree. And Jade might like make fun of me because my books are pretty dark. They are like the opposite of just, fun, happy adventures with, stakes, but no, it's so dark. So it to have those nice and tranquil and very sweet scenes do keep the balance of everything. Especially if you're pretty like adventure-y and action-y, it's nice to like take a break and really let the characters feel each other, especially if they have such a sweet relationship. So, no, that sounds all perfect. Um, well, I mean, you talked already a little bit about like a pretty difficult scene for you, but is there like maybe a difficult scene from the second book, or any kind of hard dialogue that you had to write?
Yeah, yeah, there was. So there's one scene in the second book. So the whole book was a bit of a challenge for me because it's a walking book. It is like most of the book is just them walking. Um, which I after I start, it was kind of a challenge to myself. It's like I've read a bunch of these books that are just walk books, like The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. It's just stuff like that. Um, and they pulled off so well. How do you make walking interesting? Um, so the scene though that really stuck out for me wasn't one of the action scenes. It was the scene of Dex and Lacy and their little platoon walking through the woods, and Lacy's just trying to keep their morale up. Um, and I rewrote this scene like 3 times. Um, because the first time, a big part of Lacey's character is the music she enjoys. Um, which was my way of getting a soundtrack in the book. Because all these classic movies have fantastic scores. Um, especially um, for this one, it was important because the movie was inspired by King Kong, is the first movie to ever have an original score. Little fun fact for y'all. Um, so, and a big song that keeps coming back in this is Anything Goes. Um, so at first, she was trying to keep their spirits up. She's just like singing to them, trying to get them to join in and everything. Um, and I wrote it, and then I was worried about copyright issues. Like, oh, I'm just using the lyrics of a copywritten song. Probably can't do that. Um, so I changed something that was a little bit more fitting to the characters. They're both, sold like they were both in the army back home. So it's like, okay, like a cadence, like a marching cadence could be fun. And I started writing some stuff, but then uh like cadences that I know, and it's like, wait, did they even sing these in the 40s to 50s? And I looked back and it's like, oh, they didn't like have any back in that time. So I had to write it again. And now it's just this cheesy scene of Lacey trying to tell them a joke, and everybody's just like, what was that? No, don't do that. Don't do that. You're not funny. But Lacey, it's at the end of the day, it's all just endearing to her character, and uh, especially because the situation, they're tired, they're sweaty, they're gross, they haven't eaten well in days, and she's just like, I got some laughs for you. So,
Adorable.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a sucker for rewriting of things, and it's difficult and tedious, but it's kind of fun to see the characters do the same thing but different over and over, and even like the slightest change could like do something else for the scene, but still stay true to the character. So, I like that a lot. Um, we it seems like you really love your characters. We said a lot of great things about them, but which character gave you the most trouble as an author?
So at first it was Dex because of trying to find this balance between he is not the most charismatic person. He is to Lacey. She loves him to death. Um, but he isn't Han Solo. He's not the charming scoundrel. He's an army captain. He is just he's to the point. He's goal oriented. Um, he's not all laughs sometimes. And trying to find like trying to make him still engaging, charismatic, like that might have been my sister's issue is like, well, Jaskier, like the bad guy in the first one, he spars with her a little bit more in fun ways, while Dex is just like he's not violent either. That was another big goal issue. But anyway, one at a time. He's just trying to get his wife back. And to have charm in there when he's constantly getting his legs and bones and ribs broken, and he's pissed off because his wife got kidnapped was a bit of a challenge. But then also, like reeling it in as reminding myself, he is not Flash Gordon. He's not an action hero. He is a pilot and who has no real combat experience. Like there's a joke in the beginning of the book, the first time either of them ever hold a blaster, the only time was just, at the range, qualifying on the range. Um, so making him a believable action hero by the end of the book was challenging because it's like, well, I got this one man army going up against an actual army. How can I pull that off? So the way around that was one, he doesn't really get into the fights so much as there is action in the first two acts of the book. And then the scene toward the end of him doing what I would do and just watching action movies to see how they're fighting.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, Errol Flynn did it like this. He has these moves. This is how he carried himself. I can give me 3 hours. I can probably do something like that, like that.
Yeah, I had some difficulties when it came to writing some characters, especially in my second book, where um, like I have this one character who is she has like a lot of determination. She likes to break the rules, but then she's going to be faced with things that are much bigger and much scarier than her. And so, like tackling that evolution of hers, in some senses, it almost feels like taking some steps backwards. Being so brave and then being like a little bit timid. But it's actually good for her character because she does need to learn to be scared of something. So I can definitely relate to that struggle of making Dex how he needs to grow as a character, but then you as an author having to figure out, well, how do I make him grow to be the character that he needs to be and grow in the
in
ways
a
he needs to?
in a realistic way, as far as realism goes in these kinds of books.
Yeah, it has to still be believable. So, yeah, I get it totally. Well, Empire of the Void has seemingly endless possibilities for other books, spin offs, novellas, you name it. How do you imagine the story of Dex and Lacey will evolve across the series? Do you see many more books in the future for them?
I know exactly where it's gonna go, how many books are in the series, and I know what the last line of the series is already. That one's locked in. And I will say this, when it's over, it's over.
Oh, no.
It's over. Um, one of my biggest gripes with modern storytelling, I love the movie Enchanted. That movie is a masterpiece through and through. I saw it twice in theaters. Um, and it ends with, and they lived happily ever after, and then there was a sequel where they weren't happily ever after, and I hated that. And that's an issue. It's like, and that's not the issue with this. Not just, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but they have a story and there's an end to it. Whether or not people enjoy that ending, uh, are happy or sad about it, that's on them. But it's going to be an ending. There's so much more going on in the universe, and maybe there's other stories to tell. I mean, there's the short story that I wrote aboard the Brighter Day, which is included in the hardcover. Um, like I said, there were four ships that went out on this mission with Dex and Lacey. Um, and it's the whole galaxy. But as far as Dex and Lacey go, there will be 5 books, and at the end of the 5th book, if we want to see him again, hopefully it's in a movie.
Yeah, I can understand that too. Is that I mean, you know exactly where these characters are going and how you want them to be represented. Even if there's so many like possibilities for them, I do love that in some ways they have like an end that's coming for like their story at least, and I can't wait to read all 5 books to get through to it.
Real quick on the idea of possibilities, even though it's 5 books, like you said, like the second book is very different from the first one. The third book, I cannot wait for the fourth. The fourth is, I've already decided the fourth is the one I'm gonna love the most. Um, in the outline, that's the one that connects emotionally with me the most. But no 2 books are gonna be at all the same. So lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, I know. We mentioned that genre hopping earlier a little bit, and I love that. I think that's going to add some really unique flavor to all the books, and they're each going to be a little bit different and offer something different. I think for Dex and Lacey as characters, but also for like the grander story, and I'm really excited for that. So to pivot a little bit, what's your typical writing routine or creative process?
So I try to write every night. Um, Somebody told me, and something I agree with, is like creative writing is like any other muscle. If you don't use it, it goes away, which is very true because every break I've taken has been horrible to me. Um, so try to write every night, and then usually either a glass of whiskey or some tea, and music to accompany the tone I'm going for. So with Empire, my wife was probably miserable because I would just have Dune, the Dune soundtrack, and Star Wars soundtrack, and the Flash Gordon soundtrack going at all times, and we have a very small house. Um, and then for the second one, I kind of just had the King Kong soundtrack on repeat. Um, and then some Fantasia because all pretty much all the music featured in these books has been featured in Fantasia. Um, so yeah, just every night, something to drink, and music to fit the tone.
Sounds similar
Oh,
to mine. I always have to have some sort of music. I like video game music. I've I like the show Outlander probably too much, and I don't know what kind of crack they put into that soundtrack, but it cures all my writer's block. I just have to like put that on, and then boom, we're writing something. Um, so I can relate to that. What are your publishing plans for the future? Like, what's ahead? And we kind of already talked about how many books you've got planned, which is cool, but anything you want to elaborate on?
So yeah, so aside from just the Empire, I call it the Empire Marathon because movies, marathon 'em. Uh, um, aside from that, there are a few other stories I'd like to tell down the road. Um, but I think after this, I'm definitely going to take a step away for a bit and focus on the publishing. Um, because I enjoy it a lot. I have a lot of fun with it. Um, and I like being able to get other people's books out there. I know how daunting it is to do it all on your own. Um, it's not not as fun as working with a team. Um, I that my first experience was self-publishing, and I just got very lucky. I will say this. Um, I can hype up the book the way it turned out because some amazing people offered to help me. Um, and that was what inspired me. I was like, okay, I got very lucky. I did. I know my the guy that did the cover art basically volunteered to do it. I basically just gave him a very large tip. He was just happy to be there. He was happy to be involved. He's a very good friend of mine. My editor now guided me along the marketing, the publishing route, um, just because he was a cool dude. Um, so a lot of this is very much a pay it forward kind of thing. Um, my strategy, not my strategy. Um, my the way I do this is all I ask from an author is a manuscript. Um, you can buy in however much you want, but at the end of the day, like I understand how hard it is, how expensive it can be, and I'm not trying to bankrupt you in the process. I just want to help you get your work out there because it deserves to be read. That's like my thing. Um, and I want to do that as much as possible. Um, so we've got another book coming out in January. Um, we'll hopefully have a poetry collection early spring, our first one, and then another romance book next fall. And just keep finding authors and doing this. And if I have the time, maybe I'll be able to release another book in between some of these. Um, but I just want to help people get their stories out there. And Jade, as you know, I try to do this as much as I can, even if it's not as Valenza Publishing. Um, like Jade, with your book, I wanted to promote as much as I could. I've got other friends. It's like one of the things I talk about a lot when it comes to once the book is out there, once you're sharing yourself as an author, is the community aspect. Um, if I'm at an event and somebody comes up to me, is like, "Hey, I'm looking for historical fiction." I'm not going to turn them away because I know I don't have it, but that author over there at that table does, and you should definitely check her out. Um, so it's a vehicle for me to get my books out there. It's a vehicle for me to help other people uh, as a publisher, and it's a vehicle for me to just help other writers, regardless of where they are.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely.
that's
I remember when I was having a really hard time with Fate's Tether, and it was like at a point where I didn't know whether I was going to be able to publish the book at all. You reached out to me and you're like, "Hey, I'll help you, publish a book if that's what you need." And I remember it was so kind but also very respectful too, because I remember you being like, "I know that this is your baby, and I know that if this is just not the right decision for you, that's totally fine, but I'm here to like offer you that help." And I think that's where our friendship like really started to grow, because since then we've just really been like helping each other all the time. Like I said, when I reach out to bookstores, I say, "Oh, and I also work with a publisher," and I bring Andrew's books along, and we just always like work to help each other. And I'm glad that I was able to publish on my own, because I think it was something that I wanted to prove to myself that I could do. But I also like really love what you do with Valenza Publishing, and I love all the books that have come out. Obviously, I've read each and every one of them that you've published, so clearly I
yeah.
do love Valenza Publishing.
Well, that was part of it. Like one of the reasons I like I when we first connected over Thrall. Uh, we were brand new. It was our first book, and we were just trying to find some people who like might be interested in reading. And you were kind enough to accept. I was glad you enjoyed it. And then we had another book for you. I was like, hey, I got one more if you don't mind reading it, and also we have another one. And you just kept accepting and reading and being very supportive. And this whole time, I'm now seeing after Thrall, you're posting, you've got a book coming out. I'm like, all right, sick. I can't wait to read it. And all this stuff, and then you share, I don't know if this is gonna happen anymore. And I was devastated. Like I sent you that email as soon as I saw that post.
Yeah.
Like, you better not. You better not stop this. Um, and it's like you've done so much to help us grow. And it's like, no, I need you to do this. You need to you've earned this. It's coming out.
Yeah.
So, and then being able to actually getting a copy made me so happy.
Yeah,
Um,
you've been one of my biggest supporters, and I appreciate it always, always.
That's so cute, you guys. Isn't that just the whole definition of indie publishing and coming together and whether you're the publisher, the editor, the writer, the I don't know, artist, like whoever, can come into it. That's so nice, you guys. Gives me the warm and fuzzies. Well, with all that, that we just talked about, um, what made you choose indie publishing?
so I was terrified of writing. I'm sure we've all like the imposter syndrome. Like, well, sure, I wrote this, but like, I'm not one of them. I just anybody could write. We've all been there, right? Um, so part of it was this was the first thing I ever wrote that I was actually like, hey, that's pretty good. I think I did a good job with that. But then there's still the fear, like just last week on Halloween, my wife and I dressed up as Ellen Ripley and the Xenomorph very quickly. Mine was just a black hoodie and black pants. Um, and then I was like, wait, actually, you could say we're dressed up as Lacey and the Zarmax, the names of the cyborgs in my book. But even thinking like I didn't text that, I didn't say that to anybody. I said Lacey and the cyborgs because I still feel kind of weird about it. Like it's still like I still feel that kind of like imposter syndrome or like it hasn't caught on yet, I feel like. Um, but so it was just terrifying. Like I'm actually gonna put this out there now. I'm gonna do it. Just bite the bullet, put it out there. Um, so at first self-publishing was just be like a jumping in the deep end kind of thing. Just do it. Just get it over with. Just put it out, see what people think. And then after it was out there, I was like, I'm alive. I made it. I'm not dead. And people like it, it seems. That gave me a lot of confidence. But at that point, still decided that I wanted to stick with indie and self-publishing. Um, and just for the heck of it, I sent it into like I sent the first few chapters into a traditional publisher, just just to see what could happen. And like 2 months later, I got a letter in the mail. No, I got an email. I didn't even get a letter this time. I got an email like, "Hey, thanks for the submission. We gotta say no." And who's the guy that's my editor now, he used to be my coworker. He looked over my shoulder. He's like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. That sucks." I'm like, "I'm printing this out and I'm putting it in my little my memory box or whatever it's called. I'm holding on to this forever because this is I did it. I put myself out there. I tried." Um, and I'm super proud of that. So, um, I don't know if I would have enjoyed being traditionally published. I've talked to some people um who have had great experiences. Um, there was one uh I had an interview with one recent New York Times best-selling author about that experience. She loved it. She had a great time, and I'm glad it worked out so well for her. For me, I'm thinking that's not that's not the kind of writing I want to do. Um, got some really nice inside bits. Um, so and besides, there's so much more freedom in this. Like part of what I say when I'm talking to people who have submitted with us or something, or people that are considering submitting their manuscript to us, is we give you all the freedom, the creative freedom of self-publishing with the quality of traditional house. So for our first book, Thrall, it had previously been self-published, and it was a great book, except the ending came out of nowhere and was over way too fast. So when we took it on, we sent it through the editor. He made all the changes, like the grammar changes, the format changes. We did all that, and then, but for the creative stuff, I was like, "Hey, man, this ending, I recommend you elaborate more, you flesh it out. The editor recommends you do it, but at the end of the day, it's your baby. It's your story. If this is the story told how you want to tell it, that is how I will publish it." Thankfully, he did what was recommended, but he wouldn't have to, and it wouldn't have changed anything between us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that we can see how you developed that love for indie publishing over time and how it grew. And now you're just like, this is the right decision for me. I love that. So, Andrew, tell us then, what does indie publishing mean to you?
You know, it's um the amount of times as a kid and a teenager that I wrote a script or tried to film something with friends, um, and felt like there was nothing I could have done with it was a lot. Um, this is my actual first published work. Um, this is the first time it's actually being shown anywhere formally
Ooh,
since what,
thank you for the honor.
2008? 2008, copyright. Um, called The Adventure of Jack Robinson. This is what I wrote when my grandma sat me down. Um, and it's my uncle bound this, one of the uncles that this book was for. I did illustrations and everything, and it made me very proud. I was like, "Hey, I achieved something. I wrote a book. It's only like 15 pages, but I wrote it. I was only in fourth grade." Um, and I got in the mail one day, um, after my grandma helped me submit a copyright with the Library of Congress. I got a letter from a publisher like, "Hey, we saw, your record in the Library of Congress, and we'd like to buy the rights to the book." I didn't know at the time what a scalper was, or that I was actually going to be buying into that. But I I was like, this is the coolest thing. Somebody wants to read it. Um, and at the time, my only option was to buy into a scam. So my parents thankfully warned me, don't do that. Um, but so there was that, and then like scripts I wrote, and I would write like queries to studios like, "Hey, I wrote a script. Please make my script into a movie." Um, I had a it was really, really bad. Um, but I wrote a script and printed it out. I wrote a query letter and got like a mailing address for 20th Century Fox or something. And my mom was like, "Mail that, do it, send it out. What's the worst that could happen?" So she was very supportive. Um, but not, obviously nothing ever happened with that. So for when, now that self-publishing is a thing, and like Amazon KDP was my first um experience with it. Uh, I was like, I'm doing it now. I can do it. Like, I want to get myself out there somehow, and now's my chance.
For sure. Yeah, and as you should, right? I mean, I think we're in a big era, I don't know if it's like all of our technology and everything, but a big era of indie everything and anything. Like there's indie musicians, indie animators, indie, like, I don't know if you guys know Epic the Musical. It's just this guy and he makes all this whole musical in his, I don't know. He has like a sound booth and he's inviting all these people to sing and tell the story of the Odyssey. And freaking, we were on a live, and he's grown so much that there were like 100,000 people on his live stream to see the next like section of this like Broadway concept. So, yeah, I feel like, especially with indie publishing, we're just kind of in this era where we can just do what we want and people will like it. And we don't have to rely on any sort of publisher or, um, 20th Century Fox or any sort of distributor necessarily, except I guess Ingram's Park, um, to help us
Yeah.
out. So,
Um,
talk about your publishing house. What is your biggest goal as a small indie publisher?
I'll have a bestseller would be pretty cool. Um, no, my biggest goal is just to live off of it. Um, I I have no need to be the next big thing. I'm sure some of my authors want to be. Um, one of my guys would love, he'd love for it to take off, as a big thing. He actually met he's friends now because of a signing event at a Barnes Noble. The showrunner of the show Vikings, and like the guy was at the Barnes Noble. He picked up a copy of Thrall. He's like, "Hey, this is pretty cool. This looks kind of like supernatural, occult kind of stuff." I was like, "Yeah, it is." And he read the first few chapters right there. He's like, "All right, I'm gonna buy it." And by the way, I'm the showrunner. So I think for Thrall, his goal is to get it into something bigger. Um, one of her books, The Second Act Comeback, is a book about domestic violence, and his goal is to get into groups, to start discussions, to help people out of situations like that, provide like a promise of hope with his book. So that's definitely like the most noble goal the house has. And I felt really bad when we started the marketing thing, and we are promoting it like another one of our books, and then we sat down, talked about it, and he's like, "Yeah, this is really, the point of it." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I wasn't treating it like that." Um, and then for Empire books, I just want to get my story out. Like I said, it's a thank you to my dad. I want to finish that story. Um, and as a house, I want it to be my full-time job. I don't need, like I said, I don't need to be as big as, Penguin or anything like that. If I can afford to have a nice house just in the middle of nowhere, cool. That's what I need.
For sure. Well, and I love that, like, oops, with indiness, like, success is whatever we want. And, like, I feel the same way. I don't need my books to be, fourth wing or anything, but, like, it would be really cool to be a full-time author and not have to, commute to work and do all the things. Like, if the books could just support me enough to live comfortably, that would be sick. Also, I'll just gush a second about the showrunner for Vikings being in that Barnes and Noble. My books were inspired by Vikings, and it's my favorite show. So
He
I
came
was
in the last time we were there too. He just he texted the author. He's like, "Hey, when are you gonna be around again?" And he showed up at our next event just to
that's
hang out.
that's sick. And it's so cool that you guys can make like connections like that in a Barnes and Noble, like
Yeah.
the right place, right time, like kind of meant to be. That's so cool. Um, so you decided to donate $1 of your proceeds from every copy, which is something we find inspiring. Can you tell us more about this decision and your chosen organization?
Well, we don't do that anymore. So that was the thing we
Okay.
did in December, last December, November. We tried to do it in January when we started up, but I realized that if we did that, we would make zero money ever, um, because some of our books, um, the way it was priced and everything on Ingram, it was like, well, if I donate $1 on every book that I only make 70 cents from, we changed that. Um, we just donate a percentage of our net income at the end of every month. Um, so this isn't even after, spending its or gross income net. I gotta learn the terms. It's the full income without deductions. So a portion of that every month to a different veterans or nonprofit first responder organization. This month, just yesterday, we were able to make our October donation to the Gary Sinise Foundation to help the hurricane relief. Um, we've done the 42nd Infantry Division Veterans Association, uh, Towers to Tunnels, like a 9/11 fund. Um, and usually it's just like whatever new author comes on board, like happy book birthday, where are the proceeds going this month? Um, we did just 2 months ago, a family friend uh who was a state trooper lost their life in a motor vehicle accident, and the insurance said tough luck. So we committed that month to helping pay for the funeral expenses. And then just a few months before, I lost a friend, a helicopter pilot, in the National Guard. So the family set up a scholarship in her name. So we were able to make that month's donation toward the scholarship for this pilot. Um, so every month it's a different organization, and this month, on top of everything else, what we're doing is for every 2 books sold, we're donating one to a school, a library, or a USO. Um, and hopefully we can, I mean, not many will be going to schools. Bookends and Thrall and the second I come back are definitely not appropriate for like elementary. Well, Empire might be. Thrall is not, and neither is second I come back. But so probably a lot of like high schools, libraries, and USOs. Just make sure the books get out there, people get these opportunities to read them, especially the USOs. Um, I've done my time overseas, and especially back in 2020, the USO library where I was got cleaned out. So these places need more books and some really good ones. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely admire those like donations and the fact that you keep doing it and that you found like a way to continue with it in a way that like makes sense for you as like a publishing house is really inspiring. I mean, that's the whole reason why for my first book that I decided to donate $1 out of all of the proceeds. And I definitely did have to figure out like pricing my novel so that I would actually make enough money. And then I had to like make decisions like, well, I can never make my book under this certain amount because I won't make enough to make the donation. But yeah, I really love that. I think it is incredibly inspiring that even as an indie author where you're not making the most money on every book anyway, but to put that towards a good cause, we really commend you for it. What is your best piece of advice for people who want to self-publish that you wish you would have known ahead of time?
slow down. Um, my editor always says the best advice is you can't edit a blank page, and that's great advice. But um, my big thing with Empire is I was very happy with it. I was very proud of the book. I was ready for it to be out there, and I put all the information onto KDP, ordered 100 copies, 100, and um, when the first one, when that proof came in, I brought it to my buddy. I showed him like, "Hey, it's finally here," and he opened it up, very first page. That's a typo. Shit. So for the next 2, 3 days straight, I did nothing but go through the book and find tons of errors, and re-upload, like correct them and re-upload as fast as possible. Um, it was so so rushed. Um, thankfully after those, I got rid of those 100 copies pretty fast. Um, so everything that came out after that was good. But then even when I was doing the hardcover double feature, I found a few more small things here and there. So I was like, if I just gave myself like another month, if I took my time a little bit more, um, it would have it would have been much better from the get-go. Because that's what happens. People get excited. You're proud of yourself, and you should be proud of yourself. But it's also like you're holding on to this like hot coal you just want to get rid of. You just want to be done with. You want to be able to say, I did it. I'm proud of myself. And you might slip up, miss something. Well, take
Yeah,
your
I
time. It's
I
worth it.
learned a lot. I learned this. I think Morgan and I were actually just talking about it before your interview today. Is that on book two, I've decided to completely take all the pressure off to publish at the same time as, like, just a year later from when I published book one, because I was really intent on getting the first book out, but I made so many mistakes, and not all of them drastic, not all of them, anything that kept me from getting the book out, but just mistakes that, like, next time would be nice to not have to deal with, and, like, just taking my time with the next book and ensuring that I do it properly and don't end up, making mistake after mistake. So yeah, I totally agree with you there. Well, that pretty much concludes our questions for you today. Do you have any future goals or upcoming events or releases that you want to mention before we sign off today?
So I won't be doing anything for my books in the next few months. As a house, we're getting ready for our next release. Thrall, no, not Thrall, Enthralled by J.T. McGee, the sequel to Thrall. It's coming out January 14th. Um, it's continuing on this fun, like, supernatural occult thriller story. Um, next year, next year's gonna be a fun year. It's gonna be a weird year, but it's gonna be a fun year. Um, uh, we're looking at our first poetry collection, a new author, a new poet, or children's books, and Miss Hayes has been working very hard on her next book. Um, so that's probably going to be a fall release um, again. So I'm very excited for next year.
Well, send all the new books you got my way. I'll read them.
Of course, I've been telling everybody about Fate's Tether.
Oh, well, appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Andrew, if you can tell everybody where they can buy your books and where they can find you on social media with your handles.
Yeah. So our books are available on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, on our website, valenzapublishing.com, which has options for signed gift wrapped copies, as well as an option to pay a book forward um, for just $10. Um, on social media, we're at Valenza Publishing on Instagram and Valenza.publishing on TikTok. And then personally, I'm just AV collecting if you want to see fun movie stuff.
Well, I do want to give a brief, like, introduction to your next book, because I know that we read Empire of the Void. Explorers from Earth, Dex and Lacy, have only barely escaped the clutches of the Empire of the Void and drift without direction through space. In search of sanctuary, they soon find themselves on a planet far from the heart of the void. While at first a peaceful life feels within reach, they are quickly pulled back into the fray as the shadow of the Empire threatens to find them again, and a tribe of natives force them into action. Join Dex and Lacy in the newest adventure of the Empire Marathon as they journey across the lost world of the Void. Thank you so much to Andrew Valenza for a wonderful interview. Next week, you'll be able to catch Omari Richards, author of The Kimoni Legacy, here on the Indie Book Nerds podcast.